Welcome to In Presence We Trust, a podcast about the art and heart of holding group transformational spaces. I'm Rachel Rickards, founder of the Field Facilitator Training. In Presence We Trust is a sanctuary for aspiring and experienced facilitators seeking to evolve their emergent facilitation and embodied leadership. In this episode, I am joined by special guest Ben Caron, the founder of Ultreia Beyond, an international collective of teachers, healers, and artists creating transformative experiences for communities and workplaces. Ben is based in Los Angeles, where he is a certified Yoga Alliance facilitator, singer-songwriter, and event producer. Ben's approach blends music, movement, voice, breathwork, meditation, yoga, and Buddhism. He leads events nationwide with the Caravan and serves as a lead facilitator for the Human Library Organization globally. In the conversation you're about to hear, Ben shares his journey into multi-modal facilitation, emphasizing the transformative power of music. He discusses his work with Braver Angels, using music to unite people and foster new narratives. Ben highlights the role of heart-centeredness and creating meaningful experiences in music, showcasing songs he's written which are aimed at inspiring hope and love. Known for his inclusive workshops on yoga, meditation, and mindfulness, Ben initiated the Reunited States of America project to facilitate constructive dialogue among individuals with diverse political views. He stresses personal transformation through respectful engagement and staying connected to the heart while valuing the dignity of each person's spiritual journey in all his community building efforts. If you're ready to begin, join me by taking a deep breath. One of the beautiful things we were just speaking about who you are in the big spectrum of facilitation is how multi-modality you are as a facilitator. And I'd love to just get a little understanding of what are your modalities and how are you, what kind of facilitator are you? What different areas are you facilitating?
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for having me, Rachel. So my journey really maps, I think, along my own healing journey in a lot of ways. And I think that's maybe common for a lot of facilitators is we sort of meet a need or we show up in a way that is missing perhaps sometimes. So I have been facilitating since I was really young. I was kind of that kid who was like class president a lot or like head of a lot of clubs, which means that you're oftentimes facilitating meetings, you're facilitating events in general. And so I grew up sort of in facilitation, but my facilitation shifted when I was in college and I started understanding that for me, presence, mindfulness, embodiment was something that felt really missing from my life. I think in my early ages of my life, I was fairly disembodied for a lot of different reasons, but it felt clear to me that to grow as a human being and to become the person that I wanted to become, I needed to find a path to embodiment. I needed to find a path to heart-centeredness. My mind was really running my life. I was living a very highly cerebral experience of life. And so I started studying yoga. I started studying mindfulness, Buddhism, lots of different. I tried to find my way to figure out how do I heal this aspect of myself where I'm trying to use my mind to solve problems all the time. I'm trying to use my mind to protect myself. And eventually, as I grew in my own learning around yoga, mindfulness, meditation, I got really interested in facilitating those types of experiences for other people because they were so impactful. They were so important for my own healing. And I also, sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to just, ask, I just got so curious about that that aha moment for you? And if there was a particular, like if you can pinpoint a specific moment where you were like, I'm in my head, and or there's a different way I could be right now, or this isn't working for me, like what was that? Is there a pivotal moment in time, or was it more a slower bake?
What broke through for me was acting, actually. So I moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career as an actor, and I had I had limited acting experience and limited acting training as I was growing up, but I loved the craft, and I got to participate in a lot of theater. But I was missing a lot of the underlying methodology of acting. And I was really blessed that when I went to college at Cal State Los Angeles, I worked with a teacher named Tanya Kane Perry, and her approach to acting is very mindfulness based. It's very embodied. And so, really, was the reflections that I got from her as I was acting, how in my own head I was, and how
Mm,
not present I actually was with my own body, and how important the body actually is on stage. The body is in acting. I was acting from like the neck up, and that reflection from her towards me was really the thing that like helped me to understand and break through. And then it was about searching for ways to meet that issue. And so yoga, mindfulness, meditation became part of the path. She also brought me through this really beautiful methodology in acting called viewpoints, which was a way of a sort of a mindfulness approach to acting in general or theater work. And that also was like a huge complement to the yoga and the mindfulness and the meditation that I was pursuing.
so cool. It's so beautiful that you tie that thread, because I don't know very much about acting. It's not something I've personally pursued or studied, but I've had this awareness of like, wow, it is such a trip in presence and embodiment to be an actor. Just knowing what I know from facilitation and being on stage, it's like I can only imagine the mastery that goes into being a top level actor, and what you actually have to step into. So it just touches me that that was how that reflection came back to you.
And those skill sets, I think, are very similar. So I think when we watch a really talented actor, we're watching them in total presence. We're
Yeah.
watching them in total embodiment. And oftentimes I think when we feel disconnected from an actor on stage, it's because they're disconnected from the
Yeah.
present moment.
Yeah. Well, and the same as with a facilitator, right? Like
Yeah.
when you're being facilitated by someone who's not fully with you in the experience and with themselves, the facilitation doesn't land, and you can feel it and feel, I don't know, irked by it, challenged by it. So the skill sets, I'm just fascinated right now in this moment with you of how similar they likely are.
Yeah, they are.
Since
And
you've facilitated, have you gone back into acting at all and like felt what that is like from this different perspective?
I've toyed with it. That sounds really fun. I actually the thing that got me out of acting and the reason I stopped acting was because after I graduated college, that my acting became about a career. It became about accomplishing. It became sort of from the neck up again, because rather than it being about being present in the moment, being present on stage, it became about how do I network in the right way to be able to get cast? What am I doing in the casting room? I sort of lost my own connection to the craft of it over time, and in losing my connection to the craft, I sort of lost my love for it. And
Mm,
so it's been sort of a long journey to like, I think I actually would love to return to acting again now with like the wisdom that I have from all the other experiences of my life. And I've kind of toyed with it, but I'm so in love with, and I so love the work that I'm doing right now that in a way, if I were to go back to acting, it would really just be for the love. Like I would
mm,
surrender and release everything else that isn't just the presence, isn't just the love of being on stage, and really connecting with your fellow actors and with the audience.
mm, mm,
Yeah.
beautiful. So back to your story, you got into yoga, mindfulness, meditation, and through your deep love and appreciation of what that was bringing to your life, you decided to start facilitating.
Yeah. I just kept getting deeper and deeper into the practice, and what I know about myself is that I will step up in a way as a facilitator that I oftentimes don't, either by myself or when I'm just a student. Like there's a invitation that gets extended to me to level up as a facilitator, and I find myself actually more mindful, more present in my role as facilitator than I might otherwise, because of what you just said. I'm holding the space for everybody, and that disjointedness, if it shows up, that like hiccup of presence becomes really apparent to everybody. And so in a way that elevates the stakes, and it kind of invites me into deeper presence.
I can very much relate.
Yeah.
I can very much relate. It's sometimes, it starts out as like, cool, there's this thing that either I'm really good at or that I'm really invested in, and I really want to transmit or pass that on to people. And then you stand in front of a group of people and you give it, and then you're like, oh shit, a whole new can of worms just opened up, because it's no longer just about that thing. There's now a whole new experience of the me and the you, and how we're connecting, and how I'm also guiding you into connection. But staying connected is like, wow, it's like personal growth and transformation. Uh, uh, a whole new advanced path opens up.
Yes. It's sort of like the network effect, I feel like, is when we link up like through heart coherence and we start really connecting our consciousness with one another, greater possibility opens up for all of us.
Mm. Okay, so a new question, which is like, as you started facilitating, there are these different levels of facilitation, and there's like the level where I'm creating a workshop and we're going to do this, this, and this. And I do that thing and I put it on and it's successful and yay. And we're going to rinse and repeat, do that again. And then there's usually like a moment or a experience where it's like, oh, something more is happening here.
Mm.
And your facilitation shifts. And I'm curious if you can speak about what that shift was for you or when it happened.
What a great question. I think I really like calling myself sort of a transformational experience producer. I do facilitate, but in a lot of ways, I'm bringing my theater experience, which is really about facilitating a shared experience. That's what theater is at its best, I think, is bringing people together in a space and bringing them on a transformational journey. And all the other work that I do is also the same thing. And so to me, even in my theater work, I started to understand that moment that you're talking about. There's like a zing that happens, maybe, where the audience and the actors on stage and all of the elements have come together in some perfect, like cathartic way, and everybody sort of elevates together in a space. And I experienced that a lot with really great theater when I was going through my academic years. And so to me, in a lot of ways, when I produce transformational experiences, I'm oftentimes drawing on that experience and sort of bringing that into the experience of facilitation or the experience of transformational experience production. It's always to me about, how do I set the container in a way where everybody can feel connected to one another, connected to me, ideally connected to the space, connected to the intention, and how, once we all come together, can we go on a transformative journey, a cathartic journey where something changes through the course of our time together.
Mm, mm. And you might have just answered it just then, but what are the qualifiers to you of what creates transformation, and when there's an experience where there, let's say, isn't transformation?
Transformation. I'm borrowing this from somebody else,
Mm,
and I can't entirely recall who it was, so I apologize. But somebody illuminated the difference between change and transformation is that change is like bi-directional, that one can change and then change back. That there is sort of like, you can undergo a change and then maybe life like moves and you'll shift back to your former state.
mm,
The way that they define transformation, which I really love, is when you can't go back to your former state. Something has changed so radically within you that you've actually changed from one like form into another form, whether that's like consciousness or embodiment. That to me is the mark of actual transformation. And so for me, in a transformational experience, it's enough of a shift that there's no going back from that shift.
Beautiful. I love that. Super love that. And if you remember or find out at any point in
Yeah,
time,
maybe I'll Google it and see.
you can
Yeah.
send it to me and we'll put it in the show notes somewhere. Cool. And um, so I think that there's a quite large spectrum of what your work is in the world right now. And I'm curious about from that, what is exciting you the most about what you're currently working on or the work that you're doing?
Hmm. Good question. Let me sit with that for a second. I would say two answers come to the forefront. One is that I'm involved with an organization called Braver Angels, which is a national organization for bridge building and depolarization. So it's the idea of taking folks around the country and helping us to heal the divides that we perceive exist between us. That work
Mm,
feels very timely to me right now.
mm,
To help us to write a different story, to believe in different possibilities than the ones that seem to be kind of broadcast at us of like hate and division. I'm really interested in a contrasting story to that of how we actually come together, how we can work together, how we can create together, how the future can be generative and hopeful, and there can be possibility. I really love that work. And I love working with Braver Angels. And specifically, the work that I do with them is I'm part of their music team. So some of the work that we do is we bring people together who have perceived differences, differences like political differences, cultural differences, differences of age, differences of rural and urban, and we bring them together to write music as sort of the transformative experience that helps them to write a different story of what's possible between people who believe themselves to be so different. And the magic of songwriting is sort of what transforms from the old story to a new story. And once you experience that you actually can sit across from somebody and create together, even though you believe yourselves to be so different, that's a transformative experience to me because you can't go back from that. Because now
mhm,
you have a lived experience that replaces this sort of assumption that you have of what's possible. I love that work. I also love. I'm a musician at heart. I have I've written lots of songs. For me, when I create music, when I perform music, it's always about creating a transformational experience. I tend to write from the perspective of how can the song itself be a transformational experience? How
mm,
can the song itself shift consciousness through the lyrics, through the melody, through the felt experience of that song? And so for me, when you ask what was most exciting, like my heart is music.
mm,
I know that if my life is not including music in it regularly, my heart is suffering in some sort of way. And
mm,
so when you use the word excite, that's the word like that music excites me because it makes my heart come alive.
mm. So beautiful. Thank you for sharing those too. They're really, yeah, I am in deep appreciation of the work that you do with Braver Angels, and especially I think of all but many places, America is such a prime and ripe space for that. Even within my own biological family, is there's so much separation and war around pretty much everything.
Yep.
So thank you for that. And it sounds really, really cool to bring it through the portal of music and lyrics and songwriting, and also just to bring that part of your facilitation in where you are a musician. And I've also been getting really curious about bringing more and more music, live music, particularly into transformational spaces. There's something about sound healing that is really emerging in our field right now.
Yes. As a musician, to me, the reason I love music so much is that it's one of the most advanced forms of coding of information that we have as human beings.
Mm.
And that sounds very technical, but it actually is very primal in that music has melody, it has rhythm, it has lyrics, it has texture and tone. There's so many ways in which you can subtly communicate through music that it becomes one of the most effective ways to create a transformational experience, because you can imbue so much intentionality into music because of all of the variables you can play with as a creator, as a facilitator. And so to me, sound healing is like one of the best examples of that. And I think most folks who maybe have been to a sound healing have experienced that in some way, that even though it might be hard to put language to, there is something there is something complex and mystical sort of happening in the frequencies of the sound that is emitting. And I think that is because music is existing on so many levels at the same time, that our cognitive mind is like, unless you're somebody who has studied music deeply, you're mostly processing it as a singular experience, but it's actually like a layer of experiences that's happening all at once. And I just think that that's so I love how um I love how robust that is, but simple it is at the same time. Like, we've been making music since we were dancing around fires, our ancestors. It's one of the most intrinsic parts of the human experience, music, and yet it has so much packed into it. It's one of the reasons I love it.
So sweet. So sweet to hear. I really can feel your passion come alive as you share this. How are you bringing music into your facilitation? I think we started painting some of a picture of some of the different modalities that you're currently facilitating in. So maybe we can circle back to that, and you can also sprinkle in some of the places and ways that you're also bridging music into those group spaces.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so maybe just to lay a little bit of the landscape and kind of tell you about how music exists in each of those places. But
Great. Yeah.
um, I facilitate and co-host retreats, mindfulness retreats, transformational retreats, and music is in everything that we do throughout the entire day. Obviously, it's in a class, and we use music to underscore the classes themselves. But I also teach a workshop called Music as Medicine, and it's
Mm,
the idea of what is the shared healing experience we can create when we all sing together, and what is the shared healing experience that we can have through listening, listening to a performer, or listening to a musician, but also listening to ourselves and listening to each other. There's such a deep thing that happens. I think people who do like choral music start to understand the ways you can tune your ear to really like sync up and connect to the other sounds that are in a space. And I love that moment when everybody is truly like listening and synced to one another. And so I like to teach workshops that kind of bring people together for that communal music experience. So that's a big part of the retreats that I host, is music as medicine, but music through all of the classes, through all of the workshops, and then also music like around the pool. Like music is everywhere. Like, it's playing all day long or playing a lot of the day. Sometimes we'll utilize DJs. We do ecstatic dance because I try to imbue music as much as possible with as much intentionality as possible, so it's like uplifting and supporting the experience that's taking place. So I love underscoring retreats.
mm,
Um, when it comes to the Braver Angels work, we talked about the ways that music brings people together, but Braver Angels also has a commitment to utilizing music to message the movement. And so every great movement that's existed in human history has been accompanied by music, the civil
mm,
rights movement especially. And you can think about the ways that songs help people to march, and singing together helped people to march. And so Braver Angels really understands that and tries to imbue music into their conventions, into their workshops. So we have sort of a database, a collection of musicians who have written songs about the movement, written songs about the message of bringing people together across divides and telling a new story. And so we utilize music all the time in that. Um, and then, as a musician myself, like I said before, music music to me is, it is one of the most underutilized ways of changing the world, because we, like, I like to use this example of Baby Shark, that there was a moment in time in human history where everybody on the planet somehow knew Baby Shark. They knew the melody, they knew the lyrics. And I wonder if that same viral moment had happened with some sort of message that was about healing the world, some message about connecting to your heart, some message about finding forgiveness with your fellow human beings. What could that do to the collective consciousness if we elevated, and this is not a judgment of like any other music, but if we utilize the same possibility of a Baby Shark to actually like communicate a message globally, I think music actually could be the key to shifting the collective consciousness immediately, because of how ubiquitous it is and how much it's a part of our everyday lives and how easy it is to spread music. Like a
Mm,
song can spread across the world in maybe hours, you know, based on TikTok or social media, etc. So if we leveraged the technology that existed with the right music, maybe right is not the right word, but the with music that is aimed with our, that is aligned with our objectives, aligned with our intentions, that to me could be the thing that could shift everything. And so
mm.
that's the perspective, that's where I'm coming from when I make music, is can I write the song that can be the one that shifts everything? And so that's a big part, like I said, of my heart, and why I know that I'm here on this planet right now, is to make music that accomplishes that.
Wow. It's so beautiful. It touches me very much to hear your vision and the why behind what you're doing and the passion for global impact.
Mm, there's
I
no time to lose.
right. No, it's true.
The moment is now. It is, if we were all waiting around for somebody to like flip the switch and turn on the light that says now, that switch has been flipped. It is now.
It is
There is no
now.
other time but now. Yeah.
What would that song communicate? That your Baby Shark song, like what would be the chorus, what would be the tone, what would be the message that you would long for people to receive in that?
Hmm. I've written a bunch of them and thrown them sort of out like skipping stones into the universe, into the world, as like my offering. Is it this
Mm.
one? Would you like this one? Is it
Yeah.
this one? Would you like this one? And sort of seeing the ways that for the people that have heard the music, they've reflected back to me the impact of the music. Um, I have a song called Heart Lead the Way that is really about inviting all of us into dropping into the wisdom of our hearts. It's really personal to me because that's been my journey, and it's my practice to continually like shift from the sort of fear and scarcity of the brain back down into the abundance and the wisdom of the heart. So that song to me is important, like personally, but I also think is a really good message for all of us, because scarcity, fear, I think is a huge part of what most of the problems on the planet are. And if we were all to drop into the heart space more often during the day, doesn't need to be necessarily all day, every day, right? Because we're human beings and it's a practice. But if we could continually be in that practice of being in the heart space, I think a lot of things would work themselves out really
Mm,
quite easily, actually, because
mm,
most of what's going on could not be accomplished in the heart space. It can only be accomplished in the fear and scarcity of the head.
mm,
And so that song I think is a big one. I wrote a song called Love is on the Rise, which is about believing in the idea, believing in the possibility that consciousness is shifting, that we are leading towards a more hopeful, loving future. Because to me, I think if we can't see it and if we don't believe it, it will not show up. I really believe that. I think that it's very hard to become something that you've never seen. As a human being, we need models, we need faith, we need hope, we need to believe that a brighter, better future is possible in order for us to actually create it, to have that momentum, to connect to the mission of actually doing the work. And so for me, Love is on the Rise is another song that I feel like if we could all hear and sort of like believe into together and show up for, would create that change. But like I said, like every song that I write comes from, so I could actually just go through each of the songs and tell you like, well, I hoped or I think that this one could be it. And that's kind of why I created it and kind of threw it out there. And I think if people listen to my music from that perspective of like that I wrote the song with the hope that this would be the one that would change things,
Mm,
um, that you'll kind of hear it as you're listening.
mm. Sweet. Sweet. And we'll put somehow a link somewhere below to check
Okay.
out Ben's music, and to listen. Um, thank you for that. And thank you for writing those songs, and thank you for the intentionality behind which you're um, putting your heart out into the world. Um,
It's what I'm here to do. It's what makes me happiest. It's what fulfills me the most. And so it's as much for me as it is for the collective, which I think is true for everything that we do in benevolence and service, right? Is that service does heal us, it does elevate us, it does transform us as much as it's serving the world around us.
yeah, yeah, I would have to agree. Yeah, it feels really good to be in service. It's yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
ever stop giving back.
that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we haven't been able to talk to just yet is the last 2 summers I have facilitated an experience called the Caravan, a national service and healing tour. And the idea was over the last 2 summers, I invited sort of my extended network of folks from around the country to travel together from town to town to town, showing up and asking, how can we be of service? How can we lend
Mm.
ourselves to what you need assistance with here? And that experience for the folks who came and were of service fueled, elevated, transformed, healed them and us, me, as much as it did any person that we were going to connect with. It became this reciprocality, this reciprocal experience.
So cool. What were some of the things that you got asked to provide or to do?
Yeah, so we lots of different things around the country. Everything from the first year that we did it, we actually went around and one of my friends is a professional chef. His name is Dennis Starks. Shout out to Dennis if he's watching. And he wanted to lend his professional experience and his talents to making food for people who were hungry. And so we packed a mobile kitchen and we moved around from place to place and we showed up and we crowdfunded the money to buy the groceries, and we just showed up and fed people wherever we could feed people. So that was a big part of it, is just really showing up for the base need of like people needing food, and food being a connector between people, a way to like break bread together and really meet one another and find each other, humanize each other. So I always loved those meals. I loved serving food because food is such a powerful way to connect people. We did a summit in Mesa County, Colorado, that was about bringing together all of the different stakeholders, the nonprofit leaders from around the community, to talk about how to address the challenges of houselessness in Mesa County, Colorado, because that was what they reflected was the most like urgent need that they had. And through these conversations that took place, which included bringing folks from the community who were experiencing houselessness or had been formerly houseless, bringing them in to share their sort of testimony or their experience, they came together and decided to build this beautiful complex where all of the services got to exist together in one space, so that folks from the community didn't have to run around town tracking down all of the different ways that they could receive help, but instead it all came together as one unified place. That's
Cool.
one of the things that I feel like most proud, mostly of those folks and the ways that they took the work that we all did together and made it into action and really like followed through on that for something that changed the community around them, that transformed the community. Um, Lots of different things, river cleanups. We did a lot of like stuff trying to show up for nature and picking up trash. We facilitated a bunch of experiences that were bringing people together for conversations to help heal divides. We did, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, those types of workshops for people for free as a way of inviting folks into potentially a modality that they'd never been exposed to, or maybe like was cost prohibitive for them. So those were all ways that we were of service. And like I said before, like we got just as much back from being out there in the world as we gave to the folks that we were meeting.
So cool. Is it continuing or
We're taking a hiatus for this year because what I thought would maybe be more impactful this year was to do some work around the election itself. So
Mm,
in 2020, during that election, I launched a program called the Reunited States of America Project,
mm,
which was a 6-week online discussion group that brought people together from around the country of different political views to have these bridge building conversations right in the intensity of the build up to the election. And that program I felt like was really impactful because one, it was online, so it didn't the barrier to entry was lower. More people could participate from around the country. It was less expensive for us because the Caravan ended up being quite an expensive endeavor with the ways that we were traveling around the country. And I feel like this year, my intuition said it's more important for us to reach out and connect in the weeks leading up to the election in that form that we had established before than it was to move around the country. And I didn't think I had the bandwidth to facilitate both in this
yeah.
year. So we're taking like an election year hiatus, which might be something that we do like every 4 years. We may like take election years off to focus more on like the election itself. And then in multiple years, in the future years, I would like to come back to it and be back out in spaces in the in between.
Beautiful. And is there anything around what you're offering this year with the election that you could make an invitation to right now if there's anyone listening who wants to get involved or be a part of it?
Yeah. So the easiest way to be in touch with any of the work that I do, but especially that project, is to go to bencaroncreates.com. That's BenCaron creates like creative. So bencaroncreates.com. And on there, you can sign up for my email list. And that's where I extend the invitations that to all the projects that I do. So if you're on my email list, I try to not over email, but I do when there's an opportunity for you to participate. And especially with that project, I will extend through the email list an invitation, and then it'll be as simple as just like signing up via a form.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And thank you for doing that. I know it's these worlds can be so compartmentalized at times, like the people in yoga and meditation, and then the people in politics, and then the people not, like there's so many compartments, and it gets really difficult to create these like mergers of seeing how personal and group transformation can actually impact us on a bigger global and political scale rather than just like the personal growth verticality. And so I really appreciate the stand that you're taking for that and how you're integrating all of these aspects. It's kind of like next level to get out of the navel gazing and into like looking up and out and being like, okay, cool that we can do our transformational work and get embodied, and like how are we going to keep letting this make a difference in what's actually happening today?
Yeah, it reminds me of sort of the Buddhist like idiom or like wisdom of it's easy to train in mindfulness in a cave. It's much harder to be out in the world. And that, like, I invite the folks who are watching this who are in that transformational work, who are doing the work to really transform themselves, to heal themselves, to consider the idea of being out in the world and engaging with people as like an applied practice of what you've been cultivating in your like personal work, in your personal practice. It's hard. It's really, I mean, it is one of the most challenging ways to actually put that into use, right? To show up and ask myself, okay, I've really been trying to practice being in my heart space, and now I'm sitting across from somebody that I've been told doesn't have my interest at heart, doesn't care for me, or like is specifically working against my rights. And now how do I stay in the heart space? Because the head is the tool that we've developed to keep us, to protect us in those sort of fight or flight moments. You know, our nervous system gets activated, we get into our head, and that's where the work comes in. That's where the breath, that's where the embodiment, that's where the heart-centeredness actually is most useful.
Mm,
And so it's a heck of a practice, and it's one that I am constantly, I am so much a practitioner as much as I'm a facilitator or as much as I'm a teacher. Like I every single day I am challenged by this work.
mm,
And so it's I also want to say that as like a way of inviting people into the idea that it can be a practice, and that there's no perfection in it,
mm,
right? Even the most wise and accomplished person is probably going to find situations where they feel really challenged to stay in their heart space, but I think it's worth showing up anyway.
mm, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. I'm curious. Um, if there's like a best practice that you have of a way that you, for example, you're tracking, you're up in your mind, you're not in your heart, something's happening in your personal life, and you want to come back into your heart, what do you do in that moment?
My first step with the heart, to me the heart and the body are really, they're a unified system. I they're so for me, I even now through this, like this interview, I'm in the practice of feeling my feet on the ground. That's one of my like favorite and most powerful practices. Is it actually drops me immediately into a more full sense of the body, because the feet are the furthest from my head, and so it feels like the distance is really far. But if I can drop into my feet, that's really going to ground me. If I can stabilize myself in my chair and just really feel myself grounded in the stability of my body. I try to, when I engage with people, to have my palms up if possible. To me, that feels energetically like it facilitates more openness and availability. There's a
Mm,
protectiveness that I find in my body where I notice that, like, if I'm crossing my arms, if I'm starting to like, if I notice I'm collapsing around my heart space, that's usually indicative of how, like, my body is telling me how I feel about the present moment. I'm
mm,
starting to protect, my head is coming forward, right? And so this sort of like embodied sense of heart open, palms up and open, feet on the ground, allowing myself to really come to like a neutral physical experience where I'm releasing tension. And then the breath is so important. And I especially like the idea of using as like an exercise when I'm listening, of receiving energy through the heart. I
mm,
think that for me, you know, this goes to maybe like a little bit of a tantric practice or like an energetic practice of like, is my energy penetrating or is my energy receptive? And I can actually, like, I go through the exercise of like finding space, finding receptivity in the heart space. So it's not just about sort of emanating, but it's actually like, can the heart become the container with which energy can like be received? Because for me especially, part of what I do is I armor up if I start to feel defensive. And so, and the armoring up, I think, in a way, is not trusting that the energy that's coming into my heart is safe to
mm,
receive.
mm,
And so I think for me, if I'm embodied and if I'm really able to receive energy through the heart, then I know I've found it.
mm, mm. Beautiful. And how does this practice translate in your group work? So you're in a group and you want to give this to the group. How does that translate?
Well, I'll give you an example of yesterday.
Great.
I was facilitating, and we were just doing introductions and going around sharing our names and a little bit about ourselves. And one of the participants, in my story of it, in my perception of it, I felt was already in a space of sort of attacking, or kind of like the story I created around them, or the way that I was receiving or experiencing them, was that they came in with sort of a bone to pick, that
Mm,
they were arriving with kind of something to prove, or some way they were dissatisfied just from the outset. And so I got to be in the practice through the entire rest of that session of like my own fight or flight, because now I need to trust that I'm safe in this space, that everybody else is safe, and that if I'm signaling to the rest of the group that there's danger by the way that this person is showing up, all of everybody else in my like experience of it will start to model or map that as well. And so for me, it's about that practice. It happened to be on Zoom, which I think is a little bit different of a facilitator experience for me because of the somewhat strange mechanics of like engaging with a computer, and also being in this very like static position that that kind of like chain of adjustments that I just shared is very common for me in like a fight or flight experience in facilitation, where I spent really the entire rest of that experience like, I'm safe, I'm embodied, I'm maybe misunderstanding what it is that they're trying to say. I might have created a story around like reminding myself that it actually might be me, like that I might be misunderstanding and being generous and kind and compassionate about even the way that I'm creating story around what they're saying and what they're trying
Mm,
to
mm,
offer in the space.
mm,
And also leaving room for the idea that this can be a transformative experience for that person, the way that even if it's true, even if they do come in combative and they want to attack, making it my goal that through my own generosity, through my own care, through my own intentionality of facilitatorship, that it is possible that they may leave the end of that experience feeling connected to me, feeling connected to everybody, feeling safe themselves inside of the experience, because maybe what they're reflecting back to me is that they're wary or that they don't feel safe coming into the experience. And
mm,
so my intention was to not only like not only manage and kind of be accountable for myself and how I was creating the experience, but also see if I had the wherewithal to facilitate a transformative experience with them, for them, that could help them leave the experience different than the way that they came in.
mm, mm, mm. Beautiful. Really beautiful. Yeah, the nuance in group facilitation in person and online is really complex and also really similar. It's a funny dynamic to interact with because on one hand, I found that people being behind their screens and in separate spaces can create a level of safety. It's like, okay, cool, you're in your space, I'm in my space. But for many other people, it is less safe because we don't have the ability or opportunity to be feeling one another in our animal bodies together. And I find that the group is usually pretty split around their ways of navigating safety. So it can be so complex, especially when something threatening comes into the space online.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very easy to retract away from the video screen, I think. And it's very easy, like you said, to become disembodied. So sometimes I will actually lead us through embodiment practices just to help us to counterbalance the disembodiment of the
Mm,
Zoom space or the video space.
mm,
Somebody taught me the idea of having some sort of like totem, like a physicalized object in space for somebody to have as an anchor point can be really helpful for people as well. So something that
mm,
they can have in their hands, because of how disembodied this can be, that it doesn't have the tactileness of being in a like
yeah.
physical space where you could feel your mat or you could feel the breath or the energy of the person next to you. So having some sort of totem in hand or nearby can be really helpful. But I agree. It requires a little bit of counterbalancing to the mechanics of the digital space.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. But really beautiful. Thank you for that. And I want to circle back now. When we started, we were talking about you being based in LA, and I wanted to connect into the, could call it, conscious community scene there, and your perspective or place, and anything like I think you can kind of riff off this or take it any way you want, but is like, what are the trends right now? Or like, what is like, what do you see emerging from the community in LA? Like, what does transformational group work look like there? What is cutting edge? What is like, what's percolating up that feels like, this piece is taking us somewhere. This is the emergent development of these spaces and where we're looking to take them.
Hmm. Yeah, I find Los Angeles to me to be a mecca of this type of work. Lots of communities there, intentional communities, transformational communities, and lots of people who are offering to the public transformational experiences. Um, the first thing that came to mind to me, mostly just because it's where I feel most nourished, or one of the places I feel most nourished, is Ecstatic Dance LA. Wonderful organization run by incredible people, really impeccably facilitated, really impeccably produced. They have, in the time since the pandemic, they shifted to doing essentially like a silent disco style on the beach, where you're actually dancing in the ocean as the sun is coming down with headphones in community in nature. It really checks so many of the boxes for me, and like the embodiment of it and the juiciness and the sexiness and the vibiness, and like, and children will sort of like run. One of my favorite experiences with that is like families will come and they're just having a day on the beach and they don't quite process the thing that's happening, and then they'll sort of like, a child will run up and then like look and then like see all of the people with their headphones on that are just like jamming to music that they can't hear, and like watching that experience as like people with no context come up and sort of process the sort of oddness of this beautiful transcendent thing that's happening. I love it. I'm like so enamored by Ecstatic Dance LA. I'm so enamored by the work that they do.
It's so
um
cool. Is that
yeah,
happening
so
at
shout
Santa
out.
Monica Pier or
It's happening in Venice.
in Venice?
Yeah,
Okay.
but they're starting to slowly go back to. They are now doing indoor spaces as well, as
Mm,
sort of a counterbalance. For a while, they were only outdoor, and I think that was for public health reasons.
mm.
But now they're starting to shift back to indoor, which I love too, because I love a sweaty enclosed container where like there's just not enough ventilation, and so everyone's dripping and people are rolling on the floor, and like I love like an ecstatic dance in an enclosed space. So both are totally great experiences. Yoga, meditation, mindfulness, sound healing, all of those modalities exist in like abundantly in Los
Mm,
Angeles. Everywhere
mm.
you could go to, probably I mean, this might be an exaggeration, but it occurs to me as true. Like, you could probably go to 100 different wellness type of events in Los Angeles if you knew how to find them and how to get to them, because there's so many yogis, there's so many meditation teachers, there's so many sound healers, that like it's really about being tapped into where they're at. But I think that there's tons of them every single night of the week. There's no like shortage of people who are facilitating those experiences. And I love to be in a city that like has that abundance of
Yeah.
that opportunity to go and tap into that. um LA's got everything, like I've lived there almost 20 years, and I am shocked how much I don't know, how much I discover every single like all the time. I'm discovering these ongoing events that have been brilliant, that have been going on. There's so many free things that are happening, like in the music center downtown, they do these free public massive dance experiences during the summer, which I love. Well, where they will do a different genre of music or a different genre of dance. So it's like a Bollywood night one night, and then it's a country western, and then it's hip hop. To
Wow.
me, those are transformational experiences for sure. Like, bringing folks together and connecting through the shared medium of dance and synchronized movement is very primal. It's something that our ancestors have we've been doing as human beings since the beginning, and I think is a really important part of our sense of community and felt connection with one another, is to come together and dance together. So those events that happen over the summer, I think it's like toddlers and teenagers and elders and everybody are like doing Bollywood choreography together, like in the thousands in downtown LA. Like I just think that is glorious. Like I think it's such a beautiful thing. Um, there's so much going on. I really do love Los Angeles. I have, it's the only reason that I haven't left is because I'm so in love with how much there is going on there, and I feel really tapped into tons of very conscious, very intentional, very loving, very giving people who have found a sense of deeper meaning to life than the sort of like rat race chasing productivity accomplishment kind of. I mean, these folks still have a sense of like purpose, and they're building something in their lives. But I think that I feel that most of the people I experience in Los Angeles have a sense of depth and a sense of presence.
Mm,
And that's one of the other things that I love about the city is just the huge kind of transformational community that exists there.
mm. So, 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 so beautiful. Yeah, I remember when I lived in LA, I was just like, I'm never leaving. Why would anyone leave? This is the greatest place in the
Yeah.
world. And yeah, things happened and I needed to leave. But I have a lot of nostalgia and romantic feelings about LA because it was a really important place for me. I could definitely see myself living there again.
Well, and I think actually, so a lot of people have left Los Angeles, and that's a kind of, a noted thing that's happened is there's been kind of a mass exodus of folks from Los Angeles, primarily, I think, because of cost of living.
Yeah.
And so I actually think that is a really important part of consciousness globally shifting, is I think Los Angeles became this sort of, for a while, was a mecca where folks came and they tapped into something. And I think it's really important now in this point in American history, in human history, that people do leave Los Angeles because we need to be doing this work. We need to be connecting with people. We need to be meeting people everywhere.
Yeah.
And if we all consolidate into this little closed bubble together, and I'm not to, I'm firmly against like any form of like evangelism. To me, it's really important to honor the dignity of people having their own spiritual process in their own way. And that might look like, it might look like Christianity, it might look like Islam, it might look like, to me, I believe all the ancient wisdom practices, they all have a lot of value. So I want to just be clear that I'm not espousing this idea of like Los Angeles people like spreading everywhere and spreading the good news of like transformational culture or whatever. Not at all what I'm trying to say. But what I think we can do is we can bring what we've learned, we can bring what we've cultivated and meet people where they're at and honor them in their own traditions, their own practices, and create a sense of community in other places and help to sort of like shift the culture of some other places, while also like honoring the right and the dignity of people to have their own unique culture, which is a big part of the bridge building that I've been doing, is like not coming from the posture of I'm right, I've figured it out, my way is the right way, the sort of like moral way. It's really about honoring that everybody has their own path and that they are, by honoring their choices in life and their right to choose their own path, I'm affording them dignity that I would want afforded to me.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Wow. Wow. You have a gift for being very well spoken.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, it's a practice and it comes and goes. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's going well
Enjoy
today.
it while
It's
it's here.
probably it's probably because of like the way you're facilitating this experience, right? And
Mm,
I actually started a podcast similar to this during the pandemic as a way of, I just needed a way to feel connected to people, and I needed a way to know that I was broadcasting something positive and loving into the world. And
mm,
so I did a very similar thing to what we're doing right now during the pandemic. And then when we kind of came out, I realized that it kind of served its purpose and I didn't feel called to it. But that was so rich and rewarding. And I say that to acknowledge you, that like your facilitation is helping me to be able to articulate. It's helping me to be able to channel, to flow. And I know that that is its own like super valuable form of facilitation. So thank you for facilitating this shared experience together.
mm, mm. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for the acknowledgement. And it really is, it's, you know, one of my sadnesses around being a facilitator and the facilitation community was how much competition and scarcity and kind of possessiveness I saw. And I just realized that we have this very unique shared experience that like no one else really understands what it's like to be a
Mhm.
facilitator and the journey that you have to go through in yourself. And so part of this for me has been like, I really want to celebrate other facilitators and talk and riff and jam and just like build one another up, because there really is no competition. The better your spaces are, the better my space. Like we're in this together, and there's nothing that I have that I don't want you and your spaces to have. So it's like, it just comes from this, generous, but also like how can like my inquiry for myself is like, how can I lift other facilitators up?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful intention, and thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah,
for
we do need each other, and we all have something to offer each other too. And I love learning from other facilitators. I love being in a workshop where I'm the participant. I love receiving facilitation. It feels so nice sometimes to like take off the facilitator hat and be like, "Ooh, yeah, I get to just flow in somebody else's facilitation." Like I love that. I love learning from other facilitators and being like, "Ooh, that was a really juicy choice," or like, "What a skillful way to handle that." So
yeah,
yeah, I love celebrating other facilitators too, and I learn so much by observing them.
totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Me too. Oh, Ben, we could keep going, but this it feels actually it feels really good.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure to meet you. And if you're ever journeying to Europe, please let me know. And
Yeah.
if I make my way back to Los Angeles, I'll definitely be sure to let you know.
Absolutely. Please, we can go to ecstatic dance together.
Yeah. And so for anyone who's watching, like what's coming up for you? What's on the calendar? What's like the next maybe thing or two or three where people can join in?
Yeah, thank you. Um, well, you can participate in any of the forms of facilitation that I'm doing. And again, my website, bencaroncreates.com, is kind of the best place to find all of it. Um, Braver Angels is doing workshops around the country all the time, many of them online, all of them for free. So that's a really great way if you felt compelled by kind of the bridge building conversations that we've been having. That's a really important and timely work to jump into. And we need all the people we can get, because I think we all understand, the arc, the story that we are embarking on right now.
Mm.
And it's really important for those of us who are committed to peace, committed to love, committed to healing, to show up for that. So braverangels.org is where you can follow that. I'm also, we didn't get to talk about, but I'm also one of the lead facilitators for the Human Library Organization.
Mm.
If you're curious about that, it's a place where we bring people together for these library spaces where you can check out a human being the way you would normally check out a book. So you can sit for up to 30 minutes and have this beautiful conversation with somebody about their lived experience. And it's one of the most beautiful, transformative forms of events that I've ever experienced. So
So
that's
cool.
humanlibrary.org. Yeah, if you want
Wow.
to check that out, lots more to discover there. And we do 2 free public online events a month, and I facilitate those. So if you want to come and experience that, that's a really great way to learn more about your fellow human beings. And it really centers on celebrating the diversity of the human experience and sort of uplifting that. So if that turns you on, please come, humanlibrary.org.
So cool. Thank you so much. I'm so touched and inspired by the ripples of what you're bringing into the world, Ben. I'm really glad I
Thank
got to
you.
meet you.
Me
Thank
too.
you
Thank you, Rachel.
so much for tuning in again and listening to this next episode of In Presence We Trust, the Facilitation Podcast. If you've been enjoying this podcast and the journey we've taken you on, I can highly recommend checking out my new online 6-month field facilitator training, trauma informed and certified. For this new special training environment, I've partnered with Catherine Hale, who you might remember from episode 6 of In Presence We Trust. Together, we are relaunching and redefining the field curriculum for trauma-informed space holding. This new pioneering training for embodied leaders and group facilitators will begin in February 2025 and includes a 2-phase certification process. To find out more, head over to my website, www.the-field.com/online. It's going to be an incredible 6-month journey, culminating in the first ever official Field Festival, happening August 15 to 20, 2025, which will include many headlining familiar names and faces who you've already met from this podcast. Special thank you to all the beings who have contributed to the creation of this podcast: Michelle, Vaishnavi, Joby, Lavinia, the Soundfields, Thomas and John. And thank you again for joining as we continue the journey and open up this new communal space and learning environment that is In Presence We Trust. You can subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, please feel free to like and comment below. Or head over to Facebook and join the In Presence We Trust community to continue the conversation there. Until next time, deep breath.